If you guys have watched my main channel for any length of time, it's pretty obvious what I think is one of the worst Disney animated films of all time.
Okay, then The Abomination.
Rocks. There's whale poo, and then there's you.
That's messed up.
And that is Chicken Little. And over the years, I've kind of made it a bit of a joke and a bit of a meme of how much I hate this movie. And a lot of people have asked why I don't like this film. And that's what this video is all about. Finally answering that question that so many people have had. But before we dive into that, I have a couple of things to say. Number one, I went back and rewatched the movie for this video, and I will admit, I think my hatred of this movie is a bit overblown. And that's my own fault. As I went and rewatched it, I still don't think it's good. And it would still end up at the bottom of my Disney ranking tier, but maybe not in double F tier, maybe just at the bottom of F tier. I think just keeping up the meme has made the movie worse in my mind than it actually is. And that's all the positives you're getting out of me, Chicken Little lovers out there. That's all you're gonna get from me. Speaking of which, when I first started making this joke on the main channel, I thought we were all in agreement that this was a terrible movie, but I found out pretty quickly there's actually a large amount of Chicken Little fans out there, and to them I want to say, I respect your opinion. I don't agree with it, but I respect it. If you love it, great. I don't want to take it away from you. And the last thing is, I've had many people write me trying to change my opinion on Chicken Little because of the fact that good directors worked on this film, and good actors worked on it, and good writers, and that this film at one point did help save Disney when they were in a tough spot. And all of those things are true. I'm not knocking any of that. But that doesn't mean I have to like the movie. I respect all the actors, writers, animators. They were just doing their job. Same goes for producers, executives, everybody who worked on it. And you can have great actors and great writers and great directors on a bad movie. It happens all the time. Also, I gotta give a shout out to Steve Zahn, who was the voice of Run of the Litter. I still think this man is a very underrated actor. When he gets the right part, he's fantastic. Go look at him at War for the Planet of the Apes. He played that ape, and he was fantastic. And I'd love to see him get more voice work. And I think he could do a great job if he just gets the right part, and that hasn't really happened yet. So I'm rooting for you, Steve Zahn. Now with that out of the way, let's look at Chicken Little. So one of the number one things I wanted to discuss here is how they changed the moral from the original Chicken Little story. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that an adaptation has to follow the original story's moral to a T. Not at all. If you come up with a really fun and creative idea using the same source material to get a different moral, that's great. But I don't know why they switched the moral here. The original moral of Chicken Little, or Henny Penny, if that was the version you grew up with, is don't believe everything you hear. You can't always follow the crowd. Keep calm and don't let fear drive you. Things that in today's culture we need to hear more of, but you know, we don't need to go into that right now. But instead they change it to a father-son relationship issue, and I don't know why you chose this source material to do that with. There's nothing inherent about the idea of a chicken thinking the sky is falling that would lead to a parent-child struggle in a relationship. Could you get that though? Absolutely! And they actually had an original version of this story where it made more sense. I found some deleted scenes that showed a girl version of Chicken Little before she was changed into a boy, where she struggled with her extreme overactive imagination, and everywhere around her she saw dangers that weren't there. That led to struggles with her family. That actually makes a lot of sense. And the idea that aliens were the reason that the sky was falling is an interesting concept to take Chicken Little. Just, it didn't really make sense in this version. Like, there was really no reason for that to be a thing other than, you know, aliens are cool. At least that's what it felt like. It didn't really tie in thematically in any way. And I'll give the film credit that it at least tried to tie it in with having a child-alien-dad relationship. It felt like they were trying to make it relate to the same thing that Chicken Little and Buck Cluck were going through, but it just wasn't the same, and it didn't quite register that way. Overall, it just feels like this movie is three different movies trying to work together, and it just doesn't gel. With that being the original Chicken Little story, the Chicken Little we got with Butt Cluck and Chicken Little dad issues, and the alien invasion story. None of them really feel cohesive, so it just kind of feels like a jumbled mess. Next, let's talk art style and world building. I'm gonna be really honest, I do not like the artistic direction of this movie at all. And I will give the movie some grace in the fact that yes, this is when CG was still relatively new, and this was the first fully CG feature that Disney had ever done. However, this still came out 10 years after the first Toy Story, and we'd already had some really big CG animated hits that I think all of them not only look better, but graphically hold up better than Chicken Little does. I mean, look at the movies that came out the same year, if not earlier than Chicken Little. I mean, Disney, you were working with Pixar at this time. You could have at least gotten some pointers, like, can you come help us get started over here, Pixar? But I also realized they were going through a bit of a tumultuous time with their relationship, so maybe that wasn't the best time to do that, Disney. So, okay, maybe good call there. But yeah, overall, this is not fun to look at. I know they were still experimenting with the animation at this time, but it feels really choppy, and I just think the overall general direction that they chose to go didn't quite work. And the world building of this movie really confuses me. Now, I'm not saying you have to have an insanely detailed background information on how the world of Chicken Little works, especially for a movie like Chicken Little, but even expecting the bare minimum here, I'm still confused. And that mainly boils down to the pop culture references. Now, when a pop culture reference works really well, like in a fairy tale type setting, think like Shrek, that's when something happens in the world that reminds us of a pop culture reference, but to the characters, it's not a pop culture reference, it's just something that happened. Take the entire montage of Shrek 2 at the beginning of the movie. There's all these things that to us are jokes, but to them are not. It's just stuff that's happening, and that makes it funny. In Chicken Little, though, they're straight up referencing Star Wars. They're straight up referencing King Kong. They're straight up watching Indiana Jones in a movie theater. Not an animated cartoon version, just straight up Indiana Jones. Pop culture references can be funny and fun in movies, but when they're shoehorned in like this with no thought or effort, it feels lazy. And it makes it not funny now, it feels pandering, which is never fun to feel, and it just kind of makes me upset when I see these jokes. And on the subject of world building, this town is awful. And I get that they're trying to make like a parody of a town where they're just straight up saying the quiet part out loud. Like, you know, popular kids over here, unpopular kids over here, and popular kids are always going to win. That's a funny gag in and of itself, but the way this film does it doesn't feel funny. It doesn't feel like a parody. It just feels like this town is awful. There's a way to do it, but this is not it. And the next point is, I think this film has really muddled its message to the point where I think that there's some arguably dangerous stuff in here. Like, for example, let's go back to the town we were just talking about. This town is in desperate need of a moral change. Ironically, the exact kind of change that the original Chicken Little story really was trying to hammer in, because every time something happens, they lose their minds. But instead of them actually getting called out for their mistakes or seeing them grow or change, nothing seems to happen to them. But the characters, our main characters, feel that they have to conform to their wishes. Butt Cluck seems to be doing everything that he's done in his relationship with Chicken Little to really just self-service himself with this group of already terrible people. And Chicken Little is doing everything he can to prove himself to this group of terrible people. Especially because the town is never reprimanded for being mean to Chicken Little in the first place. They just said, oh wait, he was right, so we shouldn't be mean to him about this. But if he was still wrong, all of our actions were totally justified. The film never said this, but they also never said anything to the contrary. You could easily read that. And secondly, you could make the argument that the message you get from Butt Cluck's story with Chicken Little is you're supposed to believe everything your kid says. Have you ever heard a kid? Have you ever talked to a kid? They say crazy stuff all the time. Please tell me you're not telling parents to do that. Now, granted, there are moments where you say something that sounds completely unbelievable. And it is the job of a parent that if a kid seems sincere in this, to look into it more, to try to figure this out with them and see if there's a big misunderstanding. And yes, Buck Cluck kind of did this at the beginning of the movie, just seeing an acorn and running with it. And if they had left it there, I probably wouldn't be bringing this up. But the fact is, later in the movie, after Chicken Little and Buck Cluck have their heart-to-heart, Buck Cluck just starts running with everything Chicken Little says to the nth degree. There's a difference between believing in your son that he can do more than what you thought he could, and then there's throwing out the wisdom that you have built up for decades before this child was even born to believe every single word that they have said for all eternity. Okay, that seems to be going a little too far here. If there was a nice give and take, like, maybe Chicken Little saying, look, the whole thing is we've got to get Kirby to his parents, but then Buck Cluck comes up with a way to help to achieve this mission and the two work together, that's supporting your son. Not, let's just go do everything he says word for word because this 9-year-old apparently knows more about the world than I do. That just seems irresponsible. And the other moral that really bothers me in this is the baseball game. As Abby said earlier in the movie, Chicken Little trying to go after baseball to impress his dad was a band-aid solution to their problem. Chicken Little is just looking for some immediate respect right now, and he thinks if he does well in baseball, he can get there. Not only for his dad, but also for the entire town. And I hate the fact that it worked for a split second. Now, granted, I know that it didn't last, so this band-aid solution didn't work long term, but I still argue that the fact it worked at all could still deliver a dangerous message to a child. I could easily see a kid watching this and saying, oh, see, that did work. And yeah, if Chicken Little had just ignored the second time that piece fell on him, then he could have still just had a perfect life playing baseball with his dad. Which that's not even close to the truth. And if they had had him fail at this, it would just reinforce the idea that the best way forward is to actually talk through what you need to with your parent. Him achieving the baseball win only adds to confusion. Now we gotta get to the biggest issue. Anyone who's talked about Chicken Little has brought up this point, and that is, let's talk about Buck Cluck and his relationship with Chicken Little. We've heard all the memes, we've heard all the jokes. Buck Cluck is probably one of the worst dads in cartoon history, and yeah, I'm not gonna fight that. But why? Why does this relationship pan out so poorly? Because if you look at it on paper, it actually makes a lot of sense, and there have been amazing movies with similar premises to where you understood both the parent and the child, and see it from both perspectives and just see a tragic moment. Why do we just get upset with Buck Cluck and say you're an awful dad? In How to Train Your Dragon, they had a similar father-son relationship, but people walk away loving both Hiccup and Stoic. Even though Stoic arguably did a lot worse than Buck Cluck did. Heck, he even disowned his son! But yet we still love Stoic. Why is Buck Cluck worse? Well, I think one of the biggest issues is that we never see the relationship between Chicken Little and Buck Cluck before the big acorn incident. I think this film does a really big disservice to the entire movie by starting here. What it does is that sets up, that is our entry point into this world. We don't know what it was like before Chicken Little did all this. Did Chicken Little single-handedly destroy this entire town? That seems unlikely. So, was Buck Cluck this bad of a parent beforehand? What was his relationship with Chicken Little like? Was it good? Was it strained? If it was strained, why? Was there any other underlying issues that may have caused a disconnect between him and Chicken Little? We don't know, and we'll never know, because the only thing that's ever addressed is the acorn incident. And that leads us as an audience to believe that their relationship was great before that, and just this one acorn thing happened, and now Buck Cluck can't even look Chicken Little in the eye because of what happened once a year ago, because Chicken Little overreacted to something that he thought was actually a major concern. He's a 9-year-old! They overreact all the time! This seems like an overreaction on your end, Buck Cluck, and also an overreaction of the entire town! Like, go look at it. Buck Cluck intentionally never looks Chicken Little directly in the eye for the entire first part of the movie, except for when he's telling Chicken Little that he doesn't believe in him, or he will look him in the eye after he wins the baseball game. That's just sad! Had the film given us something else to work with, anything else to be like, this was a catalyst because of something else Chicken Little was already doing. Chicken Little already had an overactive imagination that led to crazy things happening, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Wait a minute, that almost sounds like the deleted scenes you had, but then scrapped that we talked about at the beginning of this video. Another thing that feels off in the relationship between Chicken Little and Buck is it seems like the film is really trying to hammer in Chicken Little's ingenuity, and that this was going to be something that Buck Cluck would have quote-unquote seen as Chicken Little has grown up, but never really acknowledged its strengths and what it could be. It felt like it was leading up to that with how much they kept leaning into that on Chicken Little's end, only for it to not really have a good payoff. Had Buck Cluck have acknowledged that would have made all of this build up a lot stronger and help us sympathize a bit more with Buck Cluck to be like, hey, he can at least acknowledge when his son does something really cool, but it's all left to the wayside because you've got to run around town just yelling, I support my son, I support my son, I support my son. That's another big issue that I have. If a character runs around just saying what it is they believe, but not actually showing us what it is that they believe, it leads me to believe that they don't really believe the thing they're saying they believe. If they had just showed us Buck Cluck just believing Chicken Little and working with him together, then I wouldn't be bringing this up at all. But the fact he has to look at the camera going like, hey, I support my son now. Hey, we're good now. We're good. Do you hear me? I support him now. I support him now. Don't call Child Protective Services. I need him as a dependent on my taxes. Which then just makes the whole moral feel hollow. Like, he's doing this just to maintain appearances is what he feels like he's doing. It doesn't feel genuine, it doesn't feel earned, even though I must say I enjoy the line that he does say. When he looks at Chicken Little and says that I'm sorry if I made you feel that my love was something you had to earn. That is a beautiful line, and I think it's really poignant. The only thing is I don't believe it because I haven't seen anything at all in this movie that leads me to believe you really love him. Going back to the Stoic analogy, you see Stoic really genuinely care about Hiccup, just is confused about what he needs to do. Like his talks with Gobber, you hear the love that he has for his son, just his confusion and his frustration about he doesn't know what to do with him. And yes, he has a moment where he sees Hiccup doing everything that he thinks he wants Hiccup to be doing. Little does he know there's more to the story, but he has a genuine moment with him where he tries to bond about the loss of a family member that they've had, and it was really an emotional part. You believe everything Stoic is saying is genuine, you feel that love and compassion, but you don't get that with Buck Cluck. There is no heart to heart. There is no moment where they really sit down and talk, which granted, I know that's kind of the whole point, is that they've never sat down and talked about these issues, but you can have strained issues with somebody and never have that closure, but you still acknowledge that you appreciate and love the other person. And I don't feel like Chicken Little or Buck Cluck ever did that. I feel like they wanted to take that idea of a dad who doesn't talk about their emotions and pushed it way too far into the caricature zone. Like, there are dads who don't talk about their issues. That is totally a thing. And in movies, you kind of want to oversell that a bit just to make sure it's really clear to your audience what's going on, but man, they went way too far into overblowing this. That's why Buck Cluck doesn't really register with people. He doesn't feel believable. This doesn't sound like a dad that you've experienced or somewhere that you can connect with. Not misguided dad, not dad who just needs a little help. We can't sympathize or empathize with him at all, because he's just too out there. Had they have reined him in a bit and made it a little more understandable as to why he thinks the way he thinks, we might be having a totally different conversation right now, but man, he's just unpleasant to watch. So really, that sums up most of my emotions towards this movie and why I don't think it's very good. Now, I do have a couple of other biased reasons why I don't like it, but I was trying to keep as much of that out as possible and just going over things that I at least felt could be perceived as genuine critiques. But hey, if none of these things bothered you and you still love the movie, more power to you. But for me, I'm sad that I had to watch this movie again, and I do not want to watch it again anytime soon. But let me know in the comments, do you agree with me? Did I leave something out? Let me know. And I hope you guys liked this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!